Hey guys, tonight we are stepping into the dim, candlelit splendor of a Tudor banquet hall, thick with the sense of roasted meat, wax smoke, and, oddly enough, citrus. You stand near the doorway, velvet-clad nobles murmuring around you, laughter echoing off oak-paneled walls. And in almost every pocket you pass, there's something bulging slightly, round, fragrant, and far from just decorative. You lean a little closer to a tall courtier and, yep, there it is, the unmistakable zing of orange. It's not what you expected, is it? A time before deodorant, before breath mints, before room spray, and yet somehow, Elizabethan nobles thought to tuck oranges into their cloaks before arriving to flirt and feast. You probably wouldn't survive this kind of party, honestly. Not without a citrusy pocket companion of your own. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere far off or cozy, let me know your location and the time down in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing at the threshold of a Tudor feast in the late 1500s. It's winter, your ruff is itching your neck, and you've been invited by a well-connected friend, probably someone who owes you money or likes your lute playing. Everything smells intense. There's the yeasty warmth of spiced pies, smoke from the open hearth, a faint hint of urine from someone who didn't quite make it to the chamber pot, and something else. Something refreshing. You tug your embroidered sleeve aside and discreetly lift the orange from your pocket. It's heavier than it looks. Imported, of course, and expensive enough to make your hands sweat. But oh, the scent. Like bottled sunshine, sweet and a little bitter. You breathe it in slowly, letting it push out the rest of the party's chaotic smells. In this world, that orange is more than a fruit. It's armor. It's a scented shield against the assault of daily life in a society where no one's washed their underthings properly in weeks. Elizabethan England is still crawling out of the medieval era. Even in the grandest homes, hygiene is, how to put this, a creative concept. Streets reek of horse dung and human waste. Perfume is often stronger than the wearer's personality, and everyone's a little paranoid about the mysterious forces that cause illness. The word miasma floats around in conversations, bad air. Invisible death. Scent isn't just a luxury, it's protection. Real or imagined. The people around you are layered in wool and silk, sweating in stiff corsets and doublets. There's a lady fanning herself with a bit too much drama. Maybe because of the heat, or maybe because of the lord beside her chewing goose meat like it's a threat. Even the air shimmers with heat from the candle flames flickering in grand iron chandeliers. You catch a glimpse of a fellow guest discreetly sniffing a sprig of herbs. Another is wearing a pomander, a decorative ball filled with spices, dangling from a golden chain at their waist. But it's the ones with oranges in their hands, or slipping from their cuffs, who seem the most composed. One of the many curious facts about this citrus trend is that it was seen as deeply fashionable. Not just functional, but chic. Elizabethan fashion wasn't just about what you wore, it was about what you smelled like. Sure, lace was great, and ribbons were delightful, but a ripe Seville orange peeking from your pocket? That meant something. It whispered, I am worldly. I am clean. I can afford to waste fruit on fragrance. Historians still argue whether the orange in pocket trend was started by necessity or pure vanity. Some point to Queen Elizabeth herself, who was known for her fastidiousness. Others argue it filtered in through Portuguese influence, as oranges from Iberia became more available. Either way, it caught on like wildfire, perhaps because in a hall filled with sweat and song, smelling like citrus made you unforgettable. And these weren't your modern, grocery store navel oranges either. They were often bitter, Seville oranges, more pith than pulp. Not something you'd casually snack on unless you liked mouthfuls of sour. But the peel held the magic oils that clung to fingers, perfumed the air, and could be crushed into other concoctions too. Sometimes, the fruits were studded with cloves and hung like ornaments, miniature spice bombs that gave off warmth and piquancy. Others were left whole, wrapped in velvet, or pierced with pins and infused with custom oils. One merchant even offered orange pouches for the dainty-nosed noble, promising discretion and heavenly relief. You hear a small dog barking under a table and step to the side, just in time to avoid a servant bustling by with a platter of candied plums. You've still got your orange, still breathing through it, and this is only the beginning. You shift your weight as another course is brought out, something that looks suspiciously like swan, although you're not entirely sure, and you're even less sure you want to find out. The man seated nearest you lets out a mighty belch and fans himself with a folded hat. You grip your orange tighter. It's not just about comfort anymore. It's a defense mechanism. The air is thick, not just with smell, but with symbolism. In Elizabethan England, where you sat, what you wore, how you smelled, it all told a story. The court was obsessed with appearances, but not always in the way we imagine. Cleanliness wasn't about soap and water, it was about status. And in a world where hot baths were still treated with suspicion, masking your scent was far more practical than eliminating it. Let's be clear, the stink was real. People didn't bathe often. Many believed water could open the pores and allow illness in. Instead, they relied on linen shifts changed frequently, dry brushing, and, of course, scent. The wealthier you were, the more pleasant you tried to smell. It wasn't just good manners, it was a literal sign of your rank. You might think of yourself as a modern soul dropped into the past. But tonight, you're very much a creature of this world. Your orange is your best friend. You raise it to your nose and breathe deep. Around you, courtiers are doing the same, some subtly, others with theatrical flair. One lady gently presses her orange to her temple as if to cure a swoon. Another pretends to drop hers and launches into a dramatic apology as a knight retrieves it with a flirtatious grin. The stink of status is a strange thing. No one wants to admit they're using fruit as deodorant, yet everyone's doing it. It's like that one year when everyone wore the same ridiculous cologne but swore they had no idea others had it too. The nobles here are no different, each believing their choice of fruit, their particular spice blend, their orange pouch trimmed with imported lace, is the mark of refinement. Some oranges are hollowed out and filled with fragrant herbs. Lavender, rosemary, tit. These are stitched back up and kept in muffs or sleeves, a miniature garden riding along at the wrist. Occasionally, the fruit isn't real at all, carved wood, polished and painted, filled with a blend of musk and rosewater. But the real ones, those juicy, pithy orbs from warmer lands, still reign supreme. And it's not just oranges. Lemons, though rarer, were prized for their sharp, clean scent. Even apples were sometimes studded with cloves or soaked in aromatic oils. But oranges were the gold standard, affordable enough to impress, exotic enough to mystify. Here's where the fun part comes in. They didn't just keep the fruit for themselves. At particularly lively parties, guests would toss small scented oranges across the room to acquaintances, flings, or rivals. It was a game, a message, a gesture, sometimes flirtatious, sometimes mocking. A perfumed orange to the chest might mean, "I remember you," or it might mean you stink. One young noble beside you turns and murmurs, "Did you see Lady Beauchamp's orange? Stuffed with cloves and rolled in rosewater." He sounds impressed. She's expecting company tonight. You nod, pretending to understand. Later, when Lady Beauchamp catches your eye and fans herself while lifting the fruit to her lips, you wonder if she's sending a message, or just has a really bad tablemate. Historians still argue whether this scent obsession was entirely about pleasure or if it was rooted in something deeper, anxiety, perhaps. Disease was rampant. The plague lingered like an unwanted guest in every season. People believed that bad smells could carry illness. The logic was flawed but common. If the air smelled bad, it was dangerous. So a sweet-smelling fruit wasn't just fashionable, it was a small act of self-defense. In the London of 1590, this was life. The streets were open sewers, with chamber pots emptied into the gutters. Tanneries reeked of lime and rotting hide. Chimneys belched coal smoke. Even inside, the scent of unwashed bodies, burning rushlights, and decaying food clung to the walls. You breathe into your orange again, the zesty aroma cutting through the gloom. It's a small thing, but it keeps you grounded. It keeps you sane. There's an almost comic moment as a musician trips over a dog and drops his lute, prompting a cascade of citrusy pouches to roll across the floor. Guests chuckle. One woman picks hers up and sniffs it dramatically, then pretends to swoon. Everyone laughs. The tension breaks, but you notice something. No one lets go of their orange for long. It's too precious, too personal. Later, as you walk the corridors of the house, you see orange peels scattered like breadcrumbs. A trail of fallen zest from someone who either grew careless or perhaps bold. You wonder if someone dared to eat theirs mid-feast, knowing full well that Seville oranges are mouth-puckeringly sour. Maybe it was a dare, or maybe it was desperation. You pause near a window, away from the crowd, and glance at your own orange. The skin is dimpling slightly from the heat of your hand, but it still smells sharp and sweet. You think of how absurd it is, attending a lavish banquet where everyone secretly sniffs fruit to keep from gagging on the smell of each other. Absurd, but strangely comforting. And that's how things work here. You continue down the hallway, the muted sounds of lute strings and drunken laughter drifting behind you like candle smoke. The farther you walk from the great hall, the cooler and more breathable the air becomes. And still, yes, you hold on to that orange. Not tightly now, but delicately like a talisman. Your fingers have warmed it. The skin is slightly tacky with your own touch. You bring it to your nose again. Still citrusy, still powerful. But you're not the only one with this idea. As you round the corner, you stumble upon a group of younger courtiers gathered in a side chamber, deep in a game. They sit cross-legged on velvet cushions, all holding some kind of citrus fruit. Some whole, some carved with decorative spirals or artful slashes to release scent more strongly. They don't see you at first. A girl, barely more than 15, raises her orange high and declares, "If I win, I'll wear Lord Hampton's token on my girdle tomorrow." Giggling erupts, and you realize this isn't some sleepy side game. They're playing a courtly variant of Truth or Dare, Elizabethan style. Each round, a player passes their orange to another. Whoever holds two must answer a question or perform a forfeit. The game is flirtatious and vaguely scandalous, though likely no more risque than singing body rhymes at a schoolyard today. You notice that the oranges are all different, some dried and hollow, others fresh and glistening. One even looks like it's been carved into a tiny grotesque face. You slip away quietly, amused and slightly envious. There's something soothing about this ritual, this small, silly game played in the flickering light. And again you realize, the orange isn't just about smell. It's a social passport, a conversation starter, a prop, an escape. Back in the hall, the mood has shifted. You hear the unmistakable thunk of a platter hitting the floor, followed by laughter, applause, and one weary, "Oh, for God's sake, not the jellied eels again." Someone has begun reciting poetry. Not good poetry, mind you, no, the kind that rhymes moon with spoon and love with above. Still, the guests clap politely. Politeness matters. Appearances matter, even if the scent of the room is drifting dangerously toward barnyard in August. You clutch your orange again. Did you know, by the way, that Elizabeth I herself was said to favor scented gloves and pomanders? Her courtiers followed her lead, naturally. She may not have carried an orange in her pocket, but she certainly surrounded herself with scent, part perfume, part power move. If you wanted to impress her, you didn't bring her flowers. You brought her exotic spices, distilled waters, finely embroidered handkerchiefs doused in orange blossom. Pomanders were all the rage, metal or wooden spheres, hinged to open and filled with a blend of fragrant paste. But for those who couldn't afford gold cages filled with musk and civet, a humble orange, pierced with cloves and worn on a ribbon, would do. Now imagine trying to explain this to someone from the modern day. Yes, I brought fruit to a party to protect myself from the smell of the host. It sounds like satire. And yet, here you are, squeezing the peel between your fingers just enough to release a spritz of essential oil. No one notices. Or rather, they pretend not to notice. Everyone's doing it. Historians still argue whether this practice, carrying oranges, scenting gloves, stuffing sleeves with herbs, was truly about health or just about etiquette. Was it a public gesture of refinement? Or a subtle rebuke of your neighbor's hygiene? One theory suggests that the habit took on momentum of its own, eventually becoming tradition simply because people liked the ritual. That's how culture works sometimes. You do something once, then twice, and then it feels rude not to. Later that evening, as the dancing begins, you notice something strange. A small bowl of oranges has been set out near the musicians. Perhaps as gifts. Perhaps as air fresheners. One fiddler takes one and tucks it inside his hatband, then plays a reel so sprightly it nearly lifts the floorboards. You realize how oranges have woven themselves into every part of the evening. They're tucked into bodices, balanced on platters, passed under tables like whispered secrets. There's even a rumor that one noble lady keeps a miniature dog trained to fetch her orange from the hearth whenever she claps twice. It's all a bit theatrical, a bit silly, and somehow deeply charming. You begin to see how these parties work. There's a performance to everything: your posture, your scent, your accessories. Even your silence says something. You spot a gentleman across the room, a little flushed, a little tipsy, holding his orange like it's the last piece of sanity left in the world. He's not sniffing it. He's talking to it, quietly, confiding in it. You wonder what secrets he's telling, or perhaps, more likely, who he's trying to avoid. The candles are burning lower now, and the shadows are longer. Someone opens a shutter to let in a breeze, and for a moment, the room smells just slightly better. You take another breath of orange zest and almost feel at home here. This little fruit, warm in your hand, sticky with its own oils, has become more than a curiosity. It's your companion, your coping mechanism, your shield. And when someone asks you to dance, you tuck it safely in your pocket where it belongs. The music swells and you step carefully onto the crowded dance floor, unsure whether your orange will survive the evening. It bumps gently against your leg with every movement, a soft percussion beneath the vials and recorders. You don't know the steps, no one truly does, but you fake it well enough to pass. Your partner, an older woman with impressively curled hair and a lace collar that could rival a ship's sail, smiles indulgently. Just follow my lead, dear. And don't tread on the lace. You don't, mostly. As the dance spins and sways, the orange becomes a kind of metronome, swinging slightly with each turn. You can feel its weight through the layers of your clothing, linen, wool, velvet, and it grounds you. A little absurd, perhaps, but also comforting. And you realize this is part of the charm, the orange as anchor. A pocket-sized reminder that you're still yourself, even in this very odd theater of social performance. Eventually, the music slows, then fades entirely. Your partner gives you a wink and returns to the benches, dabbing her forehead with a lace kerchief. You're left standing near the hearth, where two gentlemen are deep in debate. It's not just for the smell, one says, gesturing with a half-peeled orange. It's for warding off the miasma. Everyone knows that. His companion frowns. You sound like that barber surgeon in Southwark. What's his name? Believes citrus can reverse melancholia. Well, the first shrugs. Melancholia smells worse than plague, if you ask me. You stifle a laugh and step away before you're dragged into the conversation. But it sticks with you. Miasma theory. Of course. That old belief that disease came not from germs, unknown then, but from bad air. From rot. From filth. And so, scented things weren't just pretty. They were armor. Defense. Life-saving. No wonder oranges became popular party companions. The sweeter and stronger the scent, the safer you felt. Cloves, rosemary, and citrus, all packed into makeshift pomanders or simply held close to the nose. Even doctors carried them. Plague masks, famously shaped like bird beaks, were stuffed with herbs and oranges for the same reason. And here you are, still practicing it, centuries later, without even realizing. You marvel at how this orange in your pocket is part of a long, strange lineage of protective superstitions. The only thing missing is a sprig of rue and perhaps a leech or two. Over by the long tables, servants begin clearing away the half-eaten trenchers and congealed jellies. A platter of roast swan is removed, leaving only bones and a curious aroma of cinnamon and despair. Someone's dog is licking the remains enthusiastically. The air grows stuffier again, and once more, you press the orange to your nose like a secret. A young page scurries past with a tray of possets, warm, milky drinks spiced with nutmeg and fortified with sack. You take one. It's pleasantly sweet, with a burn at the back of the throat that makes you sleepy. You sip, and with the citrus still in your other hand, begin to notice something. Everyone's doing this. Sipping possets, sniffing oranges, dabbing perfume behind ears, wafting scented kerchiefs. It's as though the entire court is participating in a quiet, unconscious ritual of masking, of pretending they don't notice the stench, or the discomfort, or the overwhelming press of too many bodies in a small, hot room. There's something oddly beautiful in it. A shared fiction. A collective agreement that everything smells like rosemary and orange blossom if you just believe hard enough. You wander toward a quieter alcove, ducking behind a thick tapestry that smells faintly of mothballs and candle wax. It's darker here, cooler. A relief. Someone's left behind a velvet pouch, half open. You peek inside. Dried citrus peels, crushed cloves, and something unidentifiable but distinctly floral. A portable scent kit. You resist the urge to steal it. Historians still debate whether these personal scent pouches were used more for charm or for survival. Were they fashion statements? Or quiet desperation? And did people even believe in the miasma? Or were they just playing along? No one really knows. But standing here, under this faded tapestry, with your orange still tucked into your pocket like a friend, you feel like you understand something deeper. It wasn't about belief. It was about comfort, control, the illusion of agency in a world where disease and filth and scandal were just part of life. You step back into the main hall. The fire has burned low. The crowd has thinned. Somewhere, someone plays a slow melody on a lute, the notes barely louder than the soft crackle of the hearth. You find yourself drawn to the corner, where a woman in green velvet is whispering to a younger man, both holding oranges close to their chests like they're telling secrets to fruit. He laughs softly. She smirks. Then they look up and see you. The woman raises her orange slightly, in silent toast. You raise yours back. And in that moment, there is nothing strange about any of this. You settle into a window seat with your posset cooling on the sill, the orange warming gently in your hand like a strange, fragrant stone. The glass pane next to you is uneven and old, distorting the moonlight as it spills in, turning familiar faces into ghostly reflections. Outside, the air must be crisp and sharp, but inside the hall, it's heavy with breath and beeswax and old perfume. You press the orange to your lips like a secret kept. You're not alone. A nobleman in fur-lined sleeves flops onto the cushion beside you with a sigh that suggests a lifetime of minor disappointments. He, too, cradles an orange, though his has been partially peeled into curling spirals. "Do you know," he begins, "some believe these blasted things keep the devil away?" You raise your eyebrows. He nods solemnly, peeling another strip. "Not the big, fiery devil. No, not that one. The little devils. Melancholia, lethargy. That sluggish demon that stops a man from rising out of bed." He tosses the peel over his shoulder like it owes him money. You laugh quietly, and he chuckles in return. "Don't scoff. These oranges cost more than my cousin's dowry. That alone could scare off any demon." It's true. In Elizabethan England, an orange wasn't a snack, it was a small fortune. Imported from Spain or Portugal, sometimes grown in orangeries owned by the absurdly rich, these fruits were precious. In a world where even sugar was a luxury, a fresh orange was practically alchemy. You glance down at yours again. You've been clutching a week's wages all night. Still, the wealthy weren't above flexing with fruit. Sometimes they didn't eat it at all, just carried it like jewelry. A fashion accessory with pulp. The more extravagant courtiers would stick whole cloves into their oranges in swirling patterns, turning them into spiced pomanders. These doubled as perfume bombs and status symbols. And naturally, the designs mattered. Spirals meant favor, zigzags implied wealth, and a full clove-covered sphere whispered, "I have servants who have servants." You wonder, idly, if your plain orange whispers anything. Perhaps, "I snuck this from the kitchens." The nobleman has nodded off mid-ramble, orange still resting on his chest like a citrusy third lung. You leave him be and rise, drifting past the musicians, who are now quietly arguing over whether to play another galliard or just pack up and go home. One of them shrugs and begins to play a soft pavane instead, its slow notes curling like smoke across the hall. You follow the music to a bench near the back, where two older women are comparing their oranges like rare coins. One has hers wrapped in lace, the other pierced with a silver stick that dangles from her waist. You pause long enough to listen. "Mine's Seville," one says smugly. "Oh, darling. Mine's Naples." You can taste the difference. You sit nearby and listen as they speak of oranges the way modern collectors speak of wine. Their voices are hushed, reverent. They kept them wrapped in silk, can you believe? Changed the cloth every day. My aunt swears she got over the spotted fever with nothing but orange juice and prayer. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine the rituals, the delicate hands unwrapping fruit, the reverent sniff, the slow slicing. Not just a snack, but a sacred moment. Oranges weren't just consumed, they were curated. It strikes you how deeply intertwined scent and safety were. Without refrigeration, without soap as we know it, without modern medicine, the world was full of rot. And humans, clever and desperate, clung to what they could. A clean-smelling object became a kind of magic. Not because it worked, necessarily, but because it helped you believe you were safe. Historians still argue whether the Elizabethans truly believed in the healing properties of oranges or whether it was all symbolic. Some suggest it was just theater, more about courtly performance than actual health. Others argue that, in a world governed by the theory of humors, citrus was seen as a balancing force, sourness to combat melancholy, brightness to cut through the black bile. You think back to that nobleman, muttering about little devils and not getting out of bed. Maybe he wasn't so wrong. Eventually, the dance slows. Not the music, the mood. The bustle dims, the chatter softens. People are drifting homeward or curling into corners, dozing with half-drunk goblets dangling from limp fingers. A servant refills your posset silently, nodding once. You thank him and turn back to the window. The moon is higher now, paler. You watch as its light slips over the rooftops and wonder how many other people, in how many other rooms, are cradling oranges against the darkness. And suddenly, it doesn't feel silly at all. The candles are guttering low now, casting the great hall into a flickering dreamscape. Wax pools like tiny sunbursts on the oak tables, and shadows leap and stretch across the walls like gossiping ghosts. You're still holding your orange, slightly warmer now from your touch, the peel glossed with oils. It's not just a fruit anymore. It's become something between a talisman and a keepsake. You rise again, padding gently toward a cluster of tapestries where a few guests linger. Their conversation is hushed and conspiratorial, and one figure gestures with the elegance of someone practiced in court flattery. You join the edge of their circle, unnoticed for a moment, until one of them, a woman with sharp cheekbones and the unmistakable look of having survived 3 marriages and at least 1 duel, turns toward you. "Oh," she says, smiling, "you've brought an orange." You nod, unsure whether to feel proud or exposed. Smart. Keeps the smells out. There it is again. This isn't just about status or scent, though those matter too. It's about defense. Because you're not at some polished modern banquet, are you? You're in an era where clean is relative and danger often enters through the nose. Not just the reek of other people, but the stench of death itself. See, during Elizabethan times, the belief in miasma, the idea that disease spread through bad air, was dominant. They didn't understand bacteria or viruses. Germ theory wouldn't catch on for a couple more centuries. But they absolutely knew when something smelled wrong. Foul smells meant danger, full stop. So, when they packed fragrant herbs into their handkerchiefs, or dangled pomanders filled with clove-studded citrus, they were creating what they believed were shields. Invisible barriers. A citrusy wall against plague. You shift the orange in your hand and breathe in slowly. The scent is strong, but not overwhelming. Right? Sure. And more importantly, alive. One man in the group, a doctor by the look of him, his doublet is a touch too black, his eyes a touch too tired, clears his throat. "The city air," he says, "is thick tonight. You can smell the river from here." You can. even through the orange. The Thames, sluggish and heavy, snakes its way through London like a vein gone septic. It carries not just the refuse of daily life but the offal of entire industries, tanneries, dye makers, butchers, brewers. If the wind hits wrong, even a royal feast can smell like an open wound. Lemongrass in the corners, the doctor says, and vinegar in bowls beneath the windows. One of the women sighs. But nothing works like citrus, does it? You want to ask whether that's because of the smell or the symbol. Because in a world like this, where people feared invisible vapors, symbols mattered. They brought comfort. They gave shape to fear. It's no accident that the Queen herself reportedly kept bowls of oranges and lemons in her chambers, or that her courtiers gifted her citrus on holidays. In fact, whole diplomatic relationships could hinge on fruit. There's a record of a Spanish ambassador presenting Elizabeth with a basket of oranges so fine, the court poets were commissioned to write sonnets about them. But the fruits weren't just diplomatic, they were devotional. A subject handing over an orange wasn't just being generous. They were pledging loyalty, or at the very least, proving they had access to someone who could sneak citrus through customs. The doctor is still talking, something about saffron poultices and mustard baths. You half listen as he describes a man he treated last spring who rubbed lemon oil on his temples for brain fog and came out convinced he was a pigeon. The others laugh gently. The night's nearly over. But before the group disperses, the sharp-cheeked woman leans in slightly. You do know why they started putting them in pockets, don't you? She asks. You shake your head. So you could breathe through one hand, she says, demonstrating with a little flourish, and slap a gossip with the other. She winks and drifts off, her laughter trailing behind her like a ribbon. You smile to yourself, pocketing the orange again, this time more deliberately. Not for fashion, not for protection, just because there's something comforting about the weight of it. Not heavy, not burdensome, just present, like a pebble you've carried for years, or a letter never opened. It makes sense now why they clung to them at parties, especially the crowded ones where perfumes battled pipe smoke and garlic breath and unwashed velvet. In moments of overwhelm, an orange was an anchor. You wander to the far end of the hall, where a musician is plucking at a lute with half-lidded eyes. He doesn't see you, lost in his own rhythm. You sit on the stone bench beside him and close your eyes, letting the notes wash over you. The scent of the orange hovers just below your nose, soft and grounding. Historians still argue whether Elizabethans truly believed oranges could ward off disease, or whether the custom was born of fashion, theater, or even mimicry from older Mediterranean traditions. Some link it to Roman practices. Others say it was simply about luxury, one more way to show you were rich enough to hold Spain in your hand. You aren't sure it matters anymore. Because here, in this moment, on this stone bench in a hall gone quiet, you're warm and you're safe, and the orange in your pocket smells like sunrise. You lean your head back against the cool stone, lulled by the lute's meandering tune and the gentle murmurs still drifting from the edges of the hall. Somewhere behind you, a servant clears goblets off a table, the soft clink of pewter against pewter folding into the ambient hush. You feel the weight of the orange in your pocket again, its quiet, fragrant heartbeat beside you, and for a moment, you try to imagine what it took for this little fruit to end up here, in your borrowed coat, on this particular night. Because the orange didn't begin here in England. Far from it. You might know that already, but the path it took was longer, stranger, and stickier than you probably imagine. It began, most likely, in the dense, humid groves of Southeast Asia, somewhere between the hills of Assam and the ancient forests of southern China. Those first bitter citrus ancestors, barely edible, were more medicine than delicacy. Packed with sour pulp and elusive oils, they were boiled, preserved, and sometimes even burned in rituals. From there, the fruit migrated. Not quickly. Oranges are picky travelers. They need warmth, sun, and patience. But humans are persistent, and by the time the classical world was waking up, the fruit had already started its grand Mediterranean tour. You shift slightly on the bench, picturing a Phoenician cargo vessel bobbing through blue waters, a few rough wooden crates tied together with twine and hope. Inside, saplings. Seeds. Maybe just the memory of sweetness, waiting for the right soil. Fast forward, Roman farmers, always eager for novelty, experimented with growing citrus in the warm pockets of their empire. They weren't quite like today's oranges, more like sour Seville types. Not the kind you'd stuff in a doublet. But still, the idea was planted. Centuries pass. The knowledge of oranges fades, reappears, flickers like candlelight across ages of trade and turmoil. The Islamic Golden Age, particularly in Al-Andalus, what you now call southern Spain, becomes a citrus revival. Gardens spring up in palaces, where oranges are prized not just for their taste, but for their scent and symbolic value. The fruit becomes poetry. Literally. You might hear an Andalusian courtier compare the perfect orange to a golden moon or a lover's sigh. There are records of scented hand-washing basins filled with orange blossom water. It was less about hygiene, more about mood. The orange was luxury, distilled. So how did it leap from poetic metaphor in Moorish Spain to pungent perfume pouch in Elizabethan England? Trade routes. And the stomachs of sailors. By the 15th and 16th centuries, maritime expansion is in full swing. Ships trawl the coasts of Africa, India, and beyond, looking for spices, gold, and sometimes just survival. Sailors began noticing something peculiar. If you eat citrus regularly, you don't fall apart at sea. Literally. No bleeding gums, no soft bones, no death by scurvy. They didn't call it vitamin C back then. But they knew a good thing when they saw it. So oranges, once a poetic flourish, became a medical miracle. They were stored on ships, traded in ports, and when in good supply, handed out like life-saving talismans. England, damp and far from any citrus grove, was not about to be left out. You rub your thumb along the dimpled skin of your orange. It's probably a bitter Seville or maybe one of the newer sweet varieties brought up through Portugal. Those were all the rage now, especially among Elizabeth's court. The Portuguese had more citrus access than just about anyone, and their ships were dripping with fruit, fabrics, and occasionally a bit of opium tucked under the rugs. Historians still debate which exact trade routes brought the first consistent flow of citrus into Tudor England. Some argue it was through Spain via France, others credit Portuguese traders who docked in Bristol and London. There are even whispers of private citrus greenhouses popping up in English noble estates, makeshift orangeries, wrapped in glass and desperation, trying to coax sunshine out of damp British fog. Imagine being one of the gardeners in charge of those, tiptoeing into a humid, glass-walled chamber every morning to check on your precious trees. Stroking the leaves, whispering encouragement, because if you could get those oranges to thrive, you weren't just growing fruit. You were cultivating prestige. Back in the hall, the lute player finally sets down his instrument, giving it a reverent little bow like one might offer a dance partner. He nods at you, soft, sleepy, and rises to leave, leaving behind a silence that feels almost sacred. You stand again and wander toward a large wooden door at the edge of the hall. It's half open, leading to a small courtyard. Cold air kisses your face as you step outside. The night has deepened, the stars pale and flickering behind a veil of chimney smoke. You pull your coat tighter. The orange stays nestled in your pocket. There's a bench by a low stone wall, and you settle there, your fingers finding the fruit again. You think about all the people who have carried citrus like this, wrapped in cloth, tucked in satchels, hidden in bodices, or presented with elaborate bows. You picture a young courtier nervously handing one to the queen, his hands shaking slightly, the orange polished to a gloss. You picture a sailor gripping one on the deck of a storm-lashed ship, his knuckles white, his breath sour with fear. It's easy to see why oranges became more than food. They were a promise of sweetness, of survival, of spring. And when they made their way into parties, into banquets and dances, they didn't just freshen the air. They reminded guests, subtly, that the world was bigger than this hall, this kingdom, even this crown. That somewhere, far beyond the fog and plague and politics, sunlight still existed. And someone, somehow, had captured it in appeal. You linger on that bench a moment longer, the orange cool and weighty in your palm, before returning inside. The hall has dimmed, candles gutter faintly, and the chatter has softened into murmurs that float like gentle waves around the vaulted ceiling. You notice now the faint but persistent scent of citrus lingering in the air, a delicate reminder that this fruit has never just been a snack. It's a symbol, a talisman, and sometimes a subtle political statement. You think about the Elizabethan court's love affair with oranges and their cousins, lemons and citrons. It was an era when scent was nearly as important as speech, and where the right aroma could open doors or close them. People believed that the fragrance of oranges could ward off disease, mask unpleasant realities, and even improve mood. You might smile at that. A simple peel to brighten a grim day sounds like something we'd all appreciate. But the role of oranges at parties wasn't just about scent or taste. They were also tools of flirtation and display. Imagine you're at a gathering in a stately manner. Men and women in lavish attire, jewelry catching the firelight, conversations weaving through politics, poetry, and scandal. You reach into your pocket, pull out a carefully wrapped orange, and offer it to a potential suitor. It's a gesture filled with meaning, conveying wealth, health, and subtle interest, all wrapped in fragrant skin. Historians still argue whether these citrus gifts were more about practical charm or symbolic power. Some say the oranges functioned as conversational props, sparking witty banter or even secret messages. Others believe they were simply the period's version of breath mints and hand sanitizer. Either way, the fruit held status. Oranges even appeared in other unexpected corners of Elizabethan life. Some noblewomen used the peel to create pomanders, scented balls of cloves and spices stuck into hollowed oranges, which they'd hang around their necks or in their chambers. These were thought to purify the air and keep illnesses at bay. In a time when miasma, or bad air, was blamed for many diseases, this was no small concern. You might chuckle to imagine a lady carefully carving holes in an orange, studding it with cloves, and then nervously tying a ribbon around her neck before heading to a crowded ballroom. The balance of fashion and function seems so delicate, so human. Of course, not all citrus was created equal. The expensive sweet oranges and delicate blood oranges were reserved for the wealthiest, while more common folk might know only the sour, rugged Seville type. The differences were as stark as those between lords and peasants at the same party. And then there's the curious case of the orange peels used beyond scent and snack. Some Elizabethan recipes called for candied peel as a delicacy, sticky, sweet, and often prepared with great care. You can almost taste the chewy texture, mixed with honey and spices, the kind of treat saved for special occasions. Candied peel was sometimes sent as a gift, symbolizing both affection and refinement. As you wander deeper into the nuances of this fruit's role, you realize that oranges were little cultural packages, carrying ideas about health, beauty, wealth, and connection. They were edible art, social currency, and an aromatic balm for the anxieties of a crowded, unpredictable world. And yet, the question lingers: why carry them in your pocket at parties? Was it practical, a quick burst of freshness amid smoky rooms? Or was it an unspoken code, a delicate dance of scent and social cue? Maybe both. Maybe something more. You glance down at the orange again. It's still there, quiet but present. You tuck it back into your pocket, feeling a bit more connected to the swirling histories of touch, taste, and smell that thread through this simple fruit. The lute music has started again, softer now, like a lullaby coaxing the night onward. You lean back into your chair, the candlelight flickering in rhythm with your slowing breath, and let yourself drift on these thoughts. The night deepens and the party hums along with a gentle rhythm, but your mind wanders back to the pocket orange, the small orb of sunlight nestled beneath your sleeve. It's curious, really, how this fruit took on such a role in Elizabethan social life. You might think of parties today as loud, chaotic gatherings, but back then, they were a careful choreography of gestures, scents, and symbols. And the orange was one of the stars of the show. You imagine the hustle and bustle behind the scenes, the servants nervously polishing silverware, the cooks in the kitchens preparing pies and roasts, and the perfumers crafting delicate sprays and pomanders to keep the air sweet. In this sensory-rich environment, the orange was like a secret weapon. Not just food, not just fragrance, but an accessory to status and sophistication. You might not know this, but Elizabethans often believed that the scent of oranges could actually influence a person's mood or health. There was a theory circulating then, called the humoral theory, that the body's health depended on balancing four fluids or humors. Scents were thought to affect these humors, calming agitation or warming the spirits. So carrying an orange could literally be a way to keep yourself in emotional equilibrium during long, taxing social events. But it wasn't all science. The orange was also playful. Court jesters reportedly used orange peel as part of their tricks, tossing it into the crowd or using the fragrant rinds to tickle unsuspecting guests. The smell lingered, a whimsical reminder of laughter beneath the formality. Historians still debate just how common it was for everyone at a party to carry oranges versus this being a luxury for the upper echelons. Some think that the wealthy might have used them as status symbols, while the average person probably saw them as rare treats, saved for special occasions. It's one of those delicious mysteries that keeps the story alive. And speaking of rarity, oranges were part of a larger fascination with exotic goods at the time. Spices, silks, and even little pets like monkeys or parrots. Having an orange tucked in your pocket was akin to flaunting a tiny piece of the wider world, a whisper of far-off places and daring voyages. You take a slow breath and imagine the rough hands of a sailor handing over a crate of these fruits, or the delicate fingers of a noblewoman peeling one carefully, the zest curling like little golden ribbons. It's the same fruit, but it carries wildly different meanings depending on who holds it. And then there's the practical side. Party rooms in Elizabethan England were often crowded and smoky, filled with people who had been wearing the same clothes for days. The orange's fresh scent was a small but vital relief from the stuffiness. You might smile at the thought of people discreetly peeling bits of fruit, sharing the scent and taste like a secret comfort. In this way, the orange acted like a portable piece of sunshine, a bright spot in otherwise dim and sometimes grim social gatherings. As the lute player softly shifts into a new melody, you let these thoughts settle, feeling the night stretch and the story unfold around you like a slow, fragrant breeze. The party flows on, and the orange in your pocket feels like a quiet companion, a small treasure amid the clinking of glasses and rustle of silk. You start thinking about the journey this fruit must have made to reach these hands. Oranges weren't grown locally in England. They had to travel from warmer climes, places like Spain, Italy, or even further afield. That journey alone was an adventure filled with risk, delays, and hopeful anticipation. You picture the oranges packed carefully into barrels, tossed aboard creaky ships that braved stormy seas and pirates. The fruit's arrival was a mark of triumph, proof of wealth and connection to the larger world. For Elizabethans, owning an orange wasn't just about flavor, it was about status, a sign you were part of a global trade network that brought rare treasures to your table. But the voyage of the orange wasn't always smooth. Sometimes the fruit arrived bruised or spoiled, disappointing eager recipients who'd been counting on that bright burst of freshness. Historians still argue whether the high value placed on oranges was mostly about scarcity or if their scent and taste truly held unique importance. In the meantime, once the oranges arrived, they were often stored carefully, sometimes in cool, dark cellars to keep them fresh longer. You might imagine servants delicately placing them in linen cloths, almost like fragile jewels. To carry one in your pocket was a statement of abundance. It said you had access to luxuries few others could afford. Oranges also made their way into recipes, both savory and sweet. Elizabethan kitchens loved experimenting, and candied peel was a popular treat, often served alongside spiced cakes or used to garnish rich dishes. The sweet tang cut through heavy flavors, much like a little musical note brightening a somber symphony. But beyond food, oranges had an almost magical reputation. Some believed that simply holding one could keep away bad luck or ill spirits. You might smirk at that idea now, but back then, superstition was a serious business. The orange's bright color and fresh scent made it a natural candidate for protective charms. And then there were the social codes tied to the fruit. Carrying an orange wasn't always just about personal use. Sometimes oranges were exchanged as gifts, tokens of goodwill or affection. You can almost hear the careful words spoken as a nobleman offers a hand-wrapped orange to a lady, their fingers brushing lightly as she accepts it. The gesture carried meanings layered like the orange's skin, sweet, sharp, and full of hidden depths. As you think on all this, the idea of the orange transforms. It's no longer just a fruit, it's a storyteller's prop, a symbol of journeys and human connections stretching across oceans and centuries. The firelight flickers lower, the room softens into shadows, and you settle deeper into this warm, fragrant history, carried gently forward by the whisper of Elizabethan nights. The flicker of candlelight casts dancing shadows as you sink further into the story, the orange still a quiet presence. You begin to realize that the fruit's role at Elizabethan parties was more than just sensory, it was woven into the complex dance of manners and etiquette that defined the era. The Elizabethan court was famous for its elaborate rituals, where every gesture, glance, and even scent conveyed subtle messages. Picture yourself at one such gathering, where a gentleman pulls an orange from his pocket and offers a segment to a lady. This is no casual act, it's loaded with meaning. Offering fruit could be a gentle form of courtship, a sign of interest that was more refined than a direct compliment. You might chuckle thinking about how this compares to modern flirting, perhaps a little less texting, a lot more peeling. There were even whispered rules about how to present or accept an orange. To refuse one might be seen as rude or dismissive, while accepting it gracefully could open doors to friendship or favor. Historians still argue how formalized these customs were, but there's no doubt the fruit was a social tool as much as a snack. And beyond flirtation, oranges could signal your standing in the social hierarchy. Only those with means and access to imported goods could carry such luxuries. The scent of orange peel might subtly announce your rank in a room packed with nobles, merchants, and artists. The fruit's vibrant color was a stark contrast to the heavy fabrics and muted tones of Elizabethan fashion. It was like carrying a piece of sunshine, an accessory that brightened not just your pocket but your entire presence. You might imagine ladies slipping oranges into embroidered pockets of their gowns, or men tucking them into their doublets, the scent mingling with perfumes and musk. Interestingly, oranges also had medicinal reputations that added to their allure. They were thought to prevent scurvy, a disease common among sailors but feared by many. Carrying an orange was a subtle nod to health awareness, a bit like today's obsession with vitamins and wellness trends. You might find it amusing that while the fruit was prized for health, it was also used in remedies that now seem a little peculiar, like orange water or distilled essences applied to the skin. Elizabethans believed these concoctions could soothe ailments, brighten complexion, or even lift spirits. As the evening deepens and voices soften, you feel a calmness settle. The orange, once just a fruit, now feels like a symbol of human desire for connection, health, and a little bit of joy wrapped in fragrant skin. The music drifts through the room once more, gentle and inviting, and you lean back, letting the scent of history mingle with the quiet night. The party begins to wane, the lively chatter softening into murmurs and gentle laughter, and your thoughts linger on the curious rituals involving the orange. You recall that in some Elizabethan circles, oranges weren't just pocket companions but centerpieces of elaborate games and entertainments. Imagine a group of nobles gathered around a table, passing an orange as part of a playful challenge or riddle, each peel revealing a whispered secret or a clever jest. One popular pastime involved peeling the orange in one continuous spiral, a small test of skill and patience that could draw appreciative glances or good-natured teasing. The elegance of this act was as much a social statement as the fruit itself. You can almost feel the smooth peel sliding between delicate fingers, the citrus scent mingling with candle wax and perfumed velvet. Beyond games, oranges sometimes appeared in theatrical performances or masks, their bright color symbolizing light, life, and even love. You might smile at the thought of actors tossing oranges to the audience or hiding them in costumes, little bursts of symbolism hidden in plain sight. There's also a quirkier side to the story. Some Elizabethans believed that orange peel could repel unwanted spirits or bad dreams. People tucked slices under pillows or hung fragrant garlands in their rooms, hoping to ensure a peaceful night. Historians still debate how widespread these superstitions were, but the idea that oranges could guard your sleep feels oddly fitting for this moment. And while we think of oranges as sweet and cheerful, there was also a bitter side, literally. The peel was often candied or used in preserves, but the bitter pith and seeds were reminders that not everything about these gatherings was sweet. Elizabethan parties were complex affairs, filled with intrigue, power plays, and sometimes hidden tensions beneath the polished surfaces. You might find it amusing that despite all their pomp, these gatherings had their share of awkward moments, spilled wine, tripping dancers, or guests trying too hard to impress with their knowledge of exotic fruits. The orange, in a way, was a gentle companion through all this human messiness. As you feel the weight of the story settle, the orange becomes more than just a fruit. It's a symbol of the delicate balance between pleasure and propriety, health and superstition, laughter and quiet moments. The scent lingers softly in the air, a whisper from a world both familiar and distant. The night's last notes float softly, wrapping you in a fragrant, golden haze as you drift deeper into the gentle embrace of history. The evening's glow dims further, and as you settle deeper into this warm historical cocoon, your thoughts drift to the orange's place in the Elizabethan economy, how this seemingly simple fruit was tangled in the threads of commerce, politics, and even diplomacy. You imagine merchants unloading crates of oranges in bustling London ports, their noses wrinkling at the sharp citrus scent mixed with sea brine and tar. These oranges were precious cargo, often taxed heavily, making them luxury items for the upper classes. Owning an orange was not just a matter of taste, but a sign of political clout and economic power. You picture a wealthy merchant slipping an orange into his pocket as a subtle boast, a fruit-sized trophy of his success. But trade was unpredictable. Ships could be delayed, lost at sea, or commandeered by pirates, turning these juicy luxuries into rare prizes. Historians still argue about how the trade routes affected the availability and price of oranges, but no one disputes that they were symbols of wealth and global connections. Beyond commerce, oranges played roles in diplomacy. Imagine ambassadors exchanging oranges as gifts during formal visits, the fruit acting as a sweet olive branch, literally. The citrus scent could ease tensions, and the gesture carried a polite message, goodwill wrapped in a fragrant peel. Oranges also influenced fashion and decor. You might picture orange blossoms woven into wedding crowns or bright slices pressed into decorative wax seals on letters. Their essence was captured in perfumes, used sparingly but effectively to impress visitors or mask less pleasant smells, a kind of Elizabethan air freshener. It's funny to think how much effort was invested in keeping this fruit fresh and presentable. Ice was a rare treat, so cool cellars and careful handling were the best tools to preserve the orange's delicate charm. You might chuckle picturing servants nervously fussing over crates of oranges like nervous parents waiting for report cards. As the fire's warmth fades to embers, you feel a quiet appreciation for the orange's journey, not just from foreign lands but into the hearts and hands of those who lived centuries ago. The fruit's bright skin now glows softly in your imagination, a beacon of a world where simple pleasures carried deep meanings. The room grows still, and you lean back, the scent of orange lingering in the cool night air, inviting you to drift gently onward. The flickering candlelight grows softer, shadows stretching longer as you sink deeper into this tranquil world. Now, think about how the orange was intertwined with Elizabethan health and hygiene practices, those curious rituals that today might seem odd or even a little amusing. Carrying an orange was believed to do more than freshen breath or signal status. It was thought to protect against miasma, the bad air believed to cause illness. You can imagine Elizabethans clutching their fragrant fruits as shields against invisible threats, like carrying tiny scented talismans. Historians still argue whether this was more superstition or an early understanding of germs and cleanliness. You might smile at the thought that oranges were a form of natural perfume, a fragrant escape from less pleasant smells of crowded rooms and unwashed bodies. Remember those times when bathing was less frequent and lavender or orange scents were practical necessities, masking the realities of daily life. The fruit's vitamin C content, though unknown then, actually helped prevent scurvy, making oranges silently heroic among other curiosities. Elizabethan sailors and travelers prized them highly for this reason, and carrying one to a party could be a subtle nod to health awareness. The orange's role extended to skincare too. You might picture Elizabethan women using orange-infused waters and pastes to brighten their complexions, or men trying to soothe irritations with citrus-based remedies. The kitchen and the apothecary blended in these concoctions, making the orange a versatile star in many households. There was also a playful side. Guests at parties sometimes exchanged slices as tokens, a kind of edible calling card, or incorporated the fruit into small poems and riddles shared between friends. The orange peel became a source of creative inspiration, weaving itself into the fabric of social interaction. As the room grows quiet, you find the orange's story a gentle reminder of how people have always sought comfort and beauty in small, fragrant things. Its soft scent drifts through time, inviting you to breathe in the calm and surrender to rest. The night wraps around you, warm and sweet, as you drift slowly towards sleep's gentle embrace. The candle's last flicker dims, and the room settles into a hushed quiet that feels almost sacred. As your mind drifts gently, you reflect on the orange's lingering presence in Elizabethan culture, the way it moved from exotic curiosity to cherished companion at celebrations and everyday moments alike. You imagine the fruit's final journey on the evening air, its scent weaving through the crowd as guests bid their farewells and slip the last slices into their pockets. The orange was more than a snack. It was a soft thread connecting health, beauty, status, and simple joy. Historians still debate the full depth of its symbolism, but one thing is clear: the orange offered a little sunshine in a world often shadowed by uncertainty. It was a gentle comfort amid the elaborate rituals and unpredictable whims of the era. You might smile, thinking of how this bright fruit, so full of life, could quietly influence moods, conversations, and even dreams. Carrying an orange was a small act of hope and care, an invitation to savor sweetness in a time when pleasures were often fleeting. As you feel sleep drawing nearer, the orange's fragrance seems to mingle with the soft night air, a quiet reminder that history is not just dates and facts but the gentle rhythms of daily life, full of small wonders waiting to be noticed. Now, let your thoughts soften, your breath slow, and your mind settle into this peaceful past. The orange's scent fades gently, like a whisper goodnight,